There is a promise Jesus made that has been softened so gently, for so long, that most believers no longer recognize what he actually said. He did not simply offer comfort, a gentle word, a passing feeling meant to soothe you for a moment before it fades. He spoke a word that meant something far stronger, far more permanent, a word that did not comfort a wound but healed it entirely. Not Greek, not English. A single Aramaic word, spoken over broken hearts, lonely rooms, and wounds no one else could reach. Tonight, that word is being given back to you. And once you hear what Jesus actually said, comfort will never feel like enough again. For centuries, believers have read the promises of Jesus toward the brokenhearted, and understood them as offers of comfort, a soft presence meant to sit beside pain and make it more bearable. These reading, translated first into Greek and then into English, quietly shrank something that was originally far larger. Comfort, by definition, coexists with the wound. It softens pain without removing it. But this was never the full promise Jesus carried toward those who came to him broken. In the Aramaic language, Jesus actually spoke. The word beneath so many of his healing encounters was ASYA, the same root word used to describe Jesus as the great physician. ASYA did not mean comfort. It meant healing, restoration, the actual mending of what was torn, not merely a gentler way to carry it. When the Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, describes Jesus reading from Isaiah and declaring he was sent to heal the brokenhearted, the Aramaic word beneath that declaration was ASYA, a promise of full restoration, not temporary relief. This distinction matters more than it may first appear. When translators soft ASYA into comfort, they the compassion but quietly lowered the ceiling of what was actually being offered. Comfort asks you to learn to live with your loneliness. ASYA asks the wound itself to close. This is why so many people today, sitting with grief, isolation, or a broken relationship, pray only for the strength to endure it, never realizing Jesus offered something far greater, actual restoration, not just the ability to survive without it. This is precisely why the loneliness epidemic so many people quietly carry, the ache of feeling unseen, disconnected, forgotten, was never meant to be simply managed. Jesus did not come only to sit beside your isolation and make it more tolerable. He came to speak ASYA directly over it, the same way he spoke it over every broken body and shattered heart that came to him. Tonight, we are going to recover exactly what that word meant, and how it can be spoken over the ache you are carrying right now. Before we continue, I want you to know that shortly, in just a few minutes, I am going to guide you through a short prayer using this very word, a moment where you and I will speak ASYA together, directly over whatever loneliness or heartbreak you are currently carrying. But first, there is something essential you need to understand about why this word carries the power it does. Jesus did not heal broken hearts with a comforting sentiment spoken in Greek. He spoke Aramaic, a language where the earliest hearers understood that words were never neutral. Every spoken word carried intention, energy, and vibration, released into the body and spirit the moment it left the lips. This is why Jesus so often healed with a single word rather than a long explanation. He trusted the sound itself, spoken with precise intention, to reach places explanation alone could never touch. When Jesus spoke ASYA over someone broken, he was not offering sympathy. He was releasing an actual restorative force, the same way a physician does not merely acknowledge an illness but works to heal it. This is the missing piece behind so many quiet, aching prayers whispered by lonely hearts today. We ask to feel a little less alone. When Jesus modeled something far greater, speaking directly to the wound itself and calling it whole again. This ancient understanding that pronunciation and intention themselves carry healing force is exactly what we explore more deeply inside the Aramaic Wisdom Guide, where each original word Jesus spoke is unpacked not only for its meaning, but for the vibration and authority behind how it was spoken over the broken and the lonely. If today's revelation has stirred something in your heart, don't let your journey end here. Our Aramaic Wisdom Guide was created to help you rediscover the original wisdom behind the word ASYA. My God, I come to you tonight carrying an ache, I have grown almost used to living with loneliness has convinced me that this is simply how life feels now, that no one truly sees me, that this wound is mine to manage alone. But you are ASYA, the one who does not merely comfort what is broken, but heals it completely. I bring you this heart tonight, exactly as it is. Restore what feels isolated. Mend what feels forgotten. Heal me fully, not just enough to endure. Amen. There is a moment in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, when a woman who had suffered for 12 years, isolated by her condition and forgotten by her community, reached out simply to touch the edge of Jesus' garment. She did not ask for comfort. She sought ASYA, actual restoration, and the moment she reached for it, power went out from him, and her body was made completely whole. Jesus did not scold her for her desperation. He called her daughter and confirmed that her faith had made her whole. This account reveals something essential about how ASYA actually functions in isolation and heartbreak. This woman had likely heard words of comfort for 12 long years, sympathy from those around her, perhaps even genuine compassion. None of it healed her. What changed everything was reaching, in faith, toward actual restoration rather than settling for comfort alongside her suffering. ASYA was never passive. It required a reaching, a willingness to believe healing itself, not just companionship in pain, was possible. This is why so many lonely hearts remain lonely, even surrounded by kind words and well-meaning comfort. They have learned to seek sympathy rather than restoration, to accept the wound as permanent rather than reaching for ASYA. The way that woman reached toward Jesus' garment, tonight, you are being invited into that same posture of reaching, trusting that the ache you carry was never meant to simply be managed, but fully healed. There is a detail easy to miss in that same account. Jesus stopped in the middle of a crowd pressing in on every side and asked, "Who touched me?" His disciples were confused. Dozens of people were touching him in that crush of butter. But Jesus knew the difference between casual contact and a reach made in genuine faith toward ASYA. He paused everything to acknowledge her, to see her, in a moment when she had likely felt invisible for over a decade. This matters enormously for anyone whose loneliness has convinced them they are unseen, forgotten in the crowd of everyone else's busy lives. ASYA was never a generic blessing spoken carelessly over a room. It was, and remains, deeply personal. Jesus, stopping, turning, seeking out the one heart reaching toward him, even when surrounded by many others. Your ache has not gone unnoticed simply because it feels invisible to everyone around you. Consider how differently your lonely moments might feel if, instead of quietly enduring the ache and hoping it fades, you reach toward ASYA the way that woman reached toward the garment, not with polished words, not with confidence that you deserve healing, but simply with the desperate faith that restoration, not just comfort, was still possible for you. Jesus did not require her to explain her suffering in detail. He simply required the reach. This is precisely why ASYA was never intended to be spoken only once in a single desperate moment of crisis. It became, for the earliest believers, a daily practice reaching toward restoration again and again, especially on the days loneliness felt loudest, because healing, like faith itself, is rarely a single event, but a posture returned to repeatedly. Tonight marks the beginning of that returning, not its conclusion. Perhaps you're wondering why these original teachings remained hidden for so long. That's why we created the Aramaic Wisdom Guide, because true knowledge sets us free. The link is waiting for you in the comments, or you can simply scan the QR code on your screen to access it right now. There is another detail worth returning to in the account of that woman's healing before she reached for Jesus. Scripture tells us she had spent everything she had on physicians who could not help her, and her condition had only grown worse. This detail matters because it reveals that ASYA was never offered only to those who had not yet tried to fix their own pain. It was offered to someone who had exhausted every other option and found herself no less alone for the effort. This offers a different way of understanding your own loneliness, especially if you have already tried everything you know to feel less isolated, new friendships that didn't last, distractions that wore off, busyness that quieted the ache only temporarily. ASYA was never withheld from her because she had already tried and failed elsewhere. In the same way, Your exhausted attempts to fix this ache on your own are not disqualifying you from JESUS's restoration. They may be exactly what brings you to reach for it at last. Notice, too, that Jesus did not require the crowd to part before he would notice her. He found her in the middle of the pressing, chaotic mass of people, the way loneliness often hides in plain sight, surrounded by others, yet feeling entirely unseen. ASYA was spoken to her specifically, personally, in the middle of that crowd, and it can be spoken just as specifically over you, whatever the room around you currently looks like. There is also a quiet discipline hidden in this account. Jesus told her to go in peace, but the healing itself had already occurred the moment she reached in faith. This suggests that ASYA is not something you must earn through years of correct behavior. It is received the moment genuine faith reaches toward it, however small or desperate that reach may feel in the moment. What makes this different from simply finding better coping mechanisms for loneliness is, again, the source. ASYA does not ask you to manage your isolation more skillfully. It asks you to reach, the way she reached, toward the same restorative power Jesus carried, and to trust that healing, not just comfort, is still available to the exact ache you are carrying tonight. Somewhere between the loneliness you have quietly carried and the wholeness Jesus offered that woman in the crowd, there is a bridge, and that bridge is built through the deliberate, repeated practice of reaching toward ASYA. The moment isolation begins to press in, this is not a self-help technique borrowed from modern loneliness research. It is an ancient reaching, modeled by a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Consider how instinctively you narrate isolation into your own story without noticing. No one really knows me. I'll always feel this way. These are not neutral observations. They are declarations, quietly deepening the very ache they describe. ASYA was given as the counter-declaration, a word strong enough to interrupt that narrative and reach toward restoration instead of settling into permanent isolation. This is why the practice matters more than a single emotional breakthrough. One powerful moment of feeling seen can move you deeply tonight, but it is the return, the willingness to reach toward ASYA again tomorrow, and the day loneliness tries to whisper lotus, which slowly retrains a heart long accustomed to believing this ache is simply permanent. Every time you reach instead of withdraw, you are practicing the same faith that woman carried through that crowded street. What began tonight as a single reach toward one moment of healing is meant to become a rhythm you carry into every future ache, spoken the instant isolation rises, spoken again if it tries to return, until ASYA is no longer something you remember to reach for, but something your spirit trusts is already near. What you have received tonight was never meant to end the moment this video does. ASYA was given to be carried, spoken, and practiced, a living restoration meant to become part of the rhythm of your days, not a single emotional moment you remember fondly and then forget. This final teaching is a practical ritual, one modeled by the very posture of reaching Jesus honored in that crowded street, meant to rebuild your relationship with connection and wholeness over time. Begin each morning, before loneliness has the chance to speak first, by speaking ASYA 3 times aloud, slowly, deliberately, reaching in faith the way that woman reached toward the garment, even before the day has given you any reason to feel less alone. This is a deliberate act of restoration, training your heart to expect connection and wholeness rather than bracing for another isolated day. Throughout the day, whenever the familiar ache of loneliness rises, a quiet room, an unanswered message, a memory of feeling forgotten, pause wherever you are and speak ASYA once, quietly, under your breath if needed. Pair it with a single physical action, placing a hand gently over your own heart, the same place that woman reached toward, acknowledging the wound rather than ignoring it. Over time, your body will begin to associate the word and the gesture with the felt sense of being seen, the same way she was seen the moment she reached. In the evening, before sleep, speak ASYA one final time, this time as a closing seal over the day, releasing every moment of isolation it carried, and trusting restoration continues even in rest, even unseen by anyone else. This nightly practice matters because loneliness often multiplies in the silence before sleep. ASYA spoken deliberately at day's end interrupts that multiplication before it follows you into the night. This is not a technique to master once and abandon. It is a covenant, rhythm, morning, moment, and evening, slowly retraining a heart that has spent years believing this ache was simply permanent. Jesus did not offer ASYA only to one woman in one crowded street 2,000 years ago. He offers it as a word available to you right now, in whatever isolated place your heart currently lives. Every time you speak it, you are not performing a ritual for its own sake. You are reaching the same way she reached, toward the wholeness you were always meant to carry. Before you go, if this message touched your heart or brought new understanding into your life, write the word ASYA. Your testimony may encourage someone else who is seeking healing and renewal. And remember, the Aramaic Wisdom Guide is always waiting for you, so you can keep rediscovering the original words of Jesus. You'll find it in the comments, or by scanning the QR code on your screen. If this revelation blessed you, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it, too. Your support helps this ancient wisdom reach more hearts. Thank you for sharing this moment of ancient wisdom with us. Until the next revelation, walk in peace, walk in freedom, and walk in the power of ASYA.